President Trump, to Blake Bourbon's point, may not have much on his schedule today, but he's getting set for this huge campaign blitz. 8 states ahead of Election Day, going to some of them twice. Former Bush 43 Deputy Chief of Staff Karl Rove joins us right now on what he makes of all of this. In terms of how the White House is deploying the president, what do you make of the strategy? Karl, he's going to Florida, Missouri, West Virginia, Montana, Tennessee, and I believe Ohio towards the end of all this. What do you make of the strategy?
Pretty smart. Remember, we're fighting on two different battlefields here. One battlefield are the parts of the country where the president's job approval is high. For example, in North Dakota, it's 60%. In Montana, it's in the high 50s. Nationwide, it's 44. So they're going to deploy the president to the places in the country where he is most popular. We're also fighting a battle in congressional districts that are basically places where Republicans were reelected, but Hillary Clinton carried the district. Now, he's been in a lot of these places earlier in this year, and a lot of his administration surrogates, his family members and members of the cabinet and the vice president are rolling through these districts and have been rolling through these districts for months. But here, as we get to the end, the president's going to focus his efforts on the parts of the country where people are in favor of him and in favor of what he's doing, and let the people who are running for the House in these swing districts have a little bit of time here at the end to leave a very strong imprint of themselves without a presidential visit coming in and walking on top.
That's interesting, because one of the things I asked about when we had this discussion earlier, Karl, was whether or not going to states that have very close Senate races, Florida, Tennessee, Missouri, others, whether that was a sign that the Republicans, by sending the president there, or the White House, were more focused maybe on adding a couple seats in the Senate, but were they giving up on the House? You say that's not the case.
No, I don't think that's the case at all. Remember, they're keenly aware of the following. If you take a look at the polls and you look at the president's job approval rating, slightly, and this is pretty consistent around the country, of those who approve of the president's job performance, about two-thirds, just over two-thirds of them generally, like him and his policies. A third of them like his policies but don't like him. They don't like the tweets and so forth and so on. So the president's going to go to the states where he tends to be significantly above the national average, or the parts of states where he's above. Watch where he goes in Ohio. Watch where he goes in Florida. I bet you it's going to be the more conservative parts of those states. And he's going to be driving up his numbers and the numbers of the candidates in states like Missouri, where he's popular, Montana, Indiana, you name it. Those states that he's going to, by and large, are states where he's significantly above the national average. And he's going to be giving the House candidates, whom he's put a bunch of money behind, a bunch of effort behind, a bunch of the political muscle of the RNC is involved in those races. He's going to let them have a time here at the end to do what they did in 2016, which is to run ahead of his national number.
Right. I guess make some of their races as local as could be. I'm interested in the breakdown there that you brought up. You said two-thirds. I get who those people are. I think I do. What do we know about that one-third group in terms of demographics and who they are? The people who like the policies but don't necessarily like the person.
They tend to be suburbanites, they tend to be women, and they tend to be college educated. And the interesting thing is that their enthusiasm for voting and their enthusiasm for coming out and voting Republican was started to alter in early September. Sort of the natural process of we're getting close to the election, and so I like the tax cuts, I like strengthening the military, I like the good conservative judges, I like what he's doing on regulatory relief, maybe I like what he's doing on trade, but I don't like these other things. But naturally in September they began to come home, and then third and fourth week of September, gasoline was poured on that fire in the form of the Kavanaugh hearings, and a lot of those people now are fervent about coming out to vote.
Right. So if the Republicans
10 days.
keep the House, that's the key group, it would seem, right? That's the group, that one-third.
That's right.
Has the Kavanaugh effect faded at all, or is that enthusiasm still there?
I think it is. I think it is topped. It's moved off the top of mind. If you ask about it in surveys, it now tends to be less impactful than it was a couple of weeks ago. But the enthusiasm measures remain at a high level. So it's sort of like it was the accelerant that sort of caused them to give a big boost, and now they've forgotten why they had the big boost, but the big boost is still there. You look at these enthusiasm measures, and the two parties are sort of close up to each other. And again, I think you put your finger on it, Colin. The White House is not writing off the House. What it's saying is we've got to put our energy and our efforts in places where it'll have the biggest impact. And in these swing districts, we need to give them the ability to end on a good note without us interfering in that message delivery system the last 7 to 10 days of the race.
All right, last thing, and then we got to go. But on election night itself, how will we know? What should we look at as the night is still young, as they say? What will be some signs?
Well, we're going to be looking at some early races. For example, Kentucky 6. Where the Democrats are taking an effort. It's the second most Democratic district in Kentucky. Kentucky closes its polls early. If it's a big blowout for the Republican, going to be a good evening. If it's close either way, it's not going to tell us much, except that it's going to be a long evening. But count on it. We may be, the control of the House may be settled by literally a couple hundred votes in a dozen or 24 races, and we may not know the next morning, because if it comes down to California, there are 7 races in California. If it's a close election, we could literally be waiting for the votes to be counted as they come in through the mail on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday in California.
Well, everyone always wonders, what do reporters root for? That's what they root for. They root for close election
There
nights.
we go.
You know.
They're going to have it this time. They're going to have it this time. House, Senate, and Governor.
We'll see you then, and we appreciate the time now. Always good. Karl Rove.